Alright, well, here goes nothing. Hey everyone, thank you for checking out my virtual senior recital. Because of the quarantine, obviously I couldn't have an actual concert, but thankfully they're letting me do a virtual version of my senior recital in lieu of one in person. So, just a disclaimer for the audio you're about to hear. Yes, I am in fact using software. There are no live players that you'll be hearing, but rest assured that it's not going to be some cheap Finale tin box instruments that you'll be hearing. I slaved away and worked really hard to make this sound as realistic as possible. But that being said, though I do love the software I've been using, I wouldn't trade it for any other software. It does have its limitations. Computers are not at the point yet where they can replicate every single sound that every single instrument can make, so thus, I had to take a few liberties with the score and arrangement in certain pieces. If you hear something that doesn't match the score, overwhelming chances are that I'm well aware of it, but I just can't do anything about it at this point. But don't worry, 95% of what you'll be hearing is what I had in mind. So, without further ado, I'm going to move on to the first piece I have for you tonight. The first piece is a brass quintet called Agni. Agni is a Hindu god of fire. He is a mercurial and morally ambiguous figure ranging from noble and heroic to chaotic and destructive. I wanted to portray him with the dynamic nature of the brass quintet. This piece is inspired by Western fanfare, but also Indian ragas and mysticism, as well as various recent abrasive music types, both art and vernacular. I hope you enjoy. This next piece is a hybrid percussion and piano piece called Emmanuel Goldstein. This piece was originally explicitly written to be danced to, so thus it had unique challenges to it. It needed to have a flowing, visceral drive behind it to compel one to move freely, but also still be at the caliber of higher classical music. I tried to strike a balance here. Emmanuel Goldstein is a character from the book 1984. He represents someone who the proletariat are not supposed to listen to or debate his ideas, but a puppet everyone is meant to blindly and mindlessly hate. This is a social commentary on the current divisiveness of our culture, where it seems everyone has become an Emmanuel Goldstein to a close friend or family member who was once cared for dearly. What's even worse is so many people's livelihoods and personal safety are being threatened because of their views, and it's hard not to be trouble when these things happen. The piece bounces back and forth from a defiant melody based on Emmanuel Goldstein's name, or various letters of it, E, A, E, G, D, E, and a heavy, oppressive atonality and dissonance. It also phases between militaristic marches and syncopated flowing beats, using the piano both as a machine and an instrument. This is meant to symbolize the inherent conflict between freedom of thought and social control. I hope you guys enjoy it. Just a heads up before beginning, this piece utilizes a lot of non conventional scoring. I'll give you a chance to look over what each symbol will mean before the piece starts. This next piece is a string duo called Daylight Savings Time. It was one of the first songs I wrote during my time at Sac State. I gleaned a lot of influences for this piece, from harsh mainstream genres to a variety of cultural music. Thus, I ended up with something that sounds categorically ambiguous and I'm proud of. Yes, it is about the literal transition between dark winter days and bright spring days. And I've heard from my colleagues that it does very much suit the concept since it conjures images of daylight and warmth, but it is also metaphorically about life getting better, slowly but surely, after a period of unhappiness and having the courage to finally be vulnerable about what you're feeling. I hope you guys enjoy. This next piece is a long and elaborate guitar suite, but it's very unconventional in a lot of ways, so I think you guys will enjoy it. Go, and yes, it's pronounced Go, is a suite for guitar that sheds light on many different musical cultures from around the world. It consists of seven distinct sections about nature, emotion, and folk life. The individual movements are a reflection of Latin American, Native American, Hispanic, Chinese, Indian, African, and Irish cultural music. The piece also shifts between the melodic and percussive qualities while still in the general aesthetic of the cultures. Irchigo includes both classical guitar techniques as well as borrowed ethnic elements. The title Ir Chu Go is the word go in three different languages: Ir in Spanish, Chu in Mandarin, and Go in English. It offers a feeling of traveling and exploring. I hope you guys enjoy. This next piece is a standard SATB choir piece called Gongyo, which is heavily inspired by Eastern spiritual Buddhist music. This piece revolves around one of the most powerful chants known in Buddhism, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. In ancient 13th century Japanese, it means I devote myself to the law of cause and effect. So, yes, this piece is very powerful and very spiritual in nature. Unfortunately, while the choir audio I'm using otherwise sounds quite real, it can't replicate words, but it will be very obvious that they are meant to be chanting the phrase judging by the rhythm and the arrangement. I hope you guys enjoy. This next piece is called Circuitry. It's a Pierrot piece, which is an ensemble made up of a flute, clarinet, violin, cello, piano, an optional percussion, and or voice. This piece is about mental disorders. As a teenager, I dealt with depression, and this is my effort at portraying what it can be like having a mental disorder in order to try and destigmatize mental illness. The title is a reference about the scientific physiology of mental disorders, that there is something wrong with the deep hiring of one's brain, and that no one can just simply snap out of it. Each instrument represents a different specific disorder. The flute is schizophrenia and plays in the wrong key during much of the piece. The clarinet is bipolar and plays with arbitrary octave displacement. The violin is anxiety and plays frenetic chromatic scales. The cello is depression and plays very few low and slow notes. The percussion is autism and is very ordered and structured, but sounds very overstimulating in parts. And the piano is PTSD, playing hard low notes and Morse code. Each part of the piece is also named after a specific neurotransmitter and the effect it has on the brain, and the piece shows that in its character. The layout of the piece is that all the instruments initially try and fail at playing a cohesive melody together, and then the piece slowly devolves into a literal mental breakdown. But then one by one, the instruments pick up the pieces, and slowly but surely, the original intended melody starts to take shape, all revolving around a single rhythmic structure, which is actually Morse code for SOS, symbolizing that those with mental illness often suffer covertly under the surface. This piece is quite dark, but it progressively becomes more and more hopeful as it goes on. I hope you guys enjoy. This next piece is called The Five Heralds, and it's a piano suite. This piece uses five different birds to represent five stages of grief. The first one, Cuckoo, is shock and denial, contrasting unsettling, cheerful passages with dark, heavy areas. After that is the Cardinal, which is anger. This is where the catharsis finally reveals itself. And then it is Crow, which is bargaining, with an increasingly desperate tone as the piece goes on and on. Then it is Vulture, which is the heaviest and darkest piece, which represents depression. Finally, there is the Hummingbird, which is acceptance and hope. The song is still very emotional and intense, but it has an overall hopeful and optimistic tone. Just a heads up before we start. The original MIDI files were saved on a hard drive that wasn't secure, and so thus all of them were deleted forever, and I had no way of getting them back. Luckily, I saved all of the audio files that those MIDI files would produce, and thankfully have an audio component to present to you. But unfortunately, it was from software that was generally inferior at audio emulation since that wasn't its primary focus. The audio for the suite will sound significantly degraded, but still at least decently realistic, and once again, mostly what I had envisioned. The suite is dedicated to two close friends of mine who passed away within the same month in October 2015, Elliot Sheets and Brianna Leah Pruitt. Until I meet you two again, this one is for you. This next piece is called Curious Raccoon and is for solo flute. As you can imagine, it's quite a silly piece about a spunky little raccoon scurrying around and going on a nighttime adventure. This piece is quite erratic with not a lot of focus, and I hope you guys can have a little bit of fun with this one. This next piece is called Black Tower. It's entirely an electric piece in a format that I invented that I call the Electro Orchestra. I want to spend just a minute talking about this format. In my experience in both the mainstream world and the classical world, getting started with electric music can be quite daunting. It feels like anything goes, and that electric music is challenging our long held notions of what counts as music and what doesn't. It feels like you're surrounded in uncharted territory, and it can be puzzling over where to start. So, here's a solid structure that you can follow. This isn't strictly defined like a sonata form, but instead it's just a guideline to help you out. You need to have four categories of four tracks, 16 tracks in total. First is the orchestral category. The orchestral category requires some type of choir, string, brass, and woodwind track. They can either sound natural or digitized, but it would be great if they at least resemble those instruments. Next is the common category. As you can imagine, this area covers instruments that most casual musicians are familiar with. This category calls for a modern keyboard track, some type of guitar, a bass instrument, and a natural drum kit. Next is the electric category. In my experience, software companies often frustratingly divide up electric sounds very arbitrarily and almost entirely based on the distributor's personal opinion. So thus clear and solid science is used here and instead sound waves are types are used. For this category, you need some type of saw wave sound, square wave sound, sine wave sound, and a pad to consolidate everything. Finally, there's the cultural category. This area covers cultural and ethnic instruments not often included in the traditional classical music zeitgeist. Here, the ethnomusicologist classification of instruments are used: an aerophone, a chordophone, an idiophone, and a membranophone. As for the piece itself, it's not a strict ABA or AB format, but each category needs at least two areas in the song where they are prominently featured. Other categories can be in the background or complementary to the lead category, but each category needs to be central at least twice. This is so it's generally agreeable to the common intro verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro format of more common music types ubiquitously seen today. The reason why I want to talk about this in depth is because I want this to be my paw print I leave on the classical music community. I think more composers and songwriters would be more open to experimenting with electric music if there was a solid guideline specifically for electric music that they can follow, and that's something I want to help out with. As for the song Black Tower itself, it's a commentary on classical music culture and where it's headed. We're in a crisis right now. Classical music is increasingly less and less culturally relevant. The hyper exclusive and honestly often elitist attitudes that a lot of classical music institutions often have is not sustainable. Otherwise, in 100 years, a lot of classical music will be lost to history. Black Tower is my personal testament that something elaborate and complex and compelling can in fact be created using extensive vernacular influences that are often deemed unworthy of acknowledgement. The first half of the song is inspired by both symphonic and industrial metal and communicates my angst and frustration with the current attitudes of classical music. The second half has a very transcendent sound and utilizes world instruments and soft new age electric music to a great degree and has a bit of a pan world cultural music feeling. It represents my hopes for the classical music community going forward should decide to reinvent itself. I know a lot of classical musicians might find my sentiments and methods here to be disagreeable, but I really hope that you at least listen with an open mind. Without further ado, here's Black Tower for Electro Orchestra. Before the last piece plays, just bear with me. Even though I know better, let's just pretend this is an actual concert. I just want to give some people a few shout outs and a few thank yous. First off, I want to thank all of my supervising professors at Sac State: Lorna Peters, Kirsten Smith, Jeffrey Hoover, and Stephen Bloomberg for helping me and pushing me to be the absolute best musician and composer I can possibly be. In these past 4 years, I've grown immensely in music, and it's all thanks to you. I want to thank my original music instructor, Bonnie Orr. Thanks for wrangling me and holding my feet to the fire to practice, even though all 9-year-old me wanted to do was play Pokemon. Thanks for setting me on this amazing path to shape who I am today. I want to thank two of my best friends who are also musicians, Seth Walton and Weston Wells. Both of you and your glorious red-necked majesty have made me into the person and musician I am today. Thank you so much for nurturing my musical talent and helping me grow both as a musician and a person. Finally, I want to thank my family. My family have been more than supportive of this pie in the sky aspiration I have and have never complained once. Thank you so much for giving me literally everything in hopes that I will succeed. You guys are the best family that anyone could ever ask for. Now, for the final piece. This is a wind quintet called Bork. Bork, capitalized with an O. Yes, after the internet meme. It's a silly piece all about my favorite dogs. Each instrument represents a different dog breed that I adore, and each instrument has a part where they can shine. The beginning is when they all come together to form the mutt section. Then it's the flute section representing the beagle in the foreground of Anglican hunting music. Then there is a clarinet representing the American Staffordshire Terrier playing silly and dopey melodies contrasted with cheesy 50s horror music, commenting on society's perception of the breed versus the dog's nature itself. Then there is a passage heavily inspired by Inuit music, and that's where the bassoon and as the Alaskan Malamute comes in, trotting with majesty, until it trips and falls on its nose towards the end. Then there's the oboe as the Australian shepherd, energetic and jubilant, in front of the background music inspired by Australian folk music. Then there's the French horn as the golden retriever, snuggling down and cuddling for a warm fuzzy nap. Finally, all of the instruments assemble again for a final mutt section and one last chance to have some fun. This piece is dedicated to Sophie Angel Carr. You lived a very long, full, and healthy life, and I know you're jumping through grass and playing tug of war in heaven. I can't wait to see you again and have you jump on me once more at the sight of me. Without further ado, here's Bork! Thank you so much for listening, everybody. You guys are the best. I hope everybody has a good day, and I hope everybody stays healthy out there. Don't worry, we'll get through this together. This is not the last you'll see of me. I have a lot of different music projects planned, and I hope you'll stay tuned because there's a lot of exciting things happening. Anyhow, we're starting to push in an hour and a half, so I gotta end this thing quick. So, thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a good day. Stay safe out there. Stay in school. Don't do drugs. And I'll see y'all soon. Okay? Thanks so much for listening, and hope you have a great day. Bye.